The trail that was never on any map. Chapter 1. The warning no one could explain. If you're hiking in northern Montana and you find a trail that isn't on your map, don't take it, because some paths were never meant to be found. I didn't believe stories like that. After 8 years as a freelance outdoor photographer, I'd heard every legend imaginable. Ghost towns in Nevada, haunted swamps in Louisiana, strange lights over Alaska. Every place had its own terrifying tale, usually told around a campfire to tourists looking for a thrill. The truth was usually far less exciting. At least, that's what I believed. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I make a living photographing America's most remote wilderness. I spend weeks alone in forests, mountains, deserts, and national parks, searching for landscapes most people will never see. Being alone never bothered me. In fact, I preferred it. When an editor from an outdoor travel magazine asked me to photograph forgotten hiking trails in northwestern Montana, I accepted without hesitation. It sounded like another routine assignment: 3 or 4 days in the wilderness, a few hundred photos, and another paycheck. Nothing about it seemed unusual. The drive from Missoula took nearly 9 hours. As the miles passed, the roads became emptier. Small towns disappeared behind me, replaced by endless forests of towering pine trees. The mountains grew larger with every mile, their snow-covered peaks hidden beneath heavy gray clouds. By late afternoon, rain began falling. Not a heavy storm, just a steady drizzle that covered the windshield in tiny drops. My GPS signal flickered for a moment before reconnecting. I didn't think much of it. The town of Black Pine finally appeared just before sunset. It was small enough to miss if you weren't paying attention. A weathered gas station stood beside a narrow road. Across from it sat a diner, with faded red letters hanging above the entrance. A sheriff's office occupied the next corner, followed by an old motel whose flickering neon sign buzzed softly in the rain. Everything felt forgotten, as if time had simply stopped. I checked into the motel and carried my camera gear inside. The woman behind the counter looked to be in her late 60s. Her silver hair was tied into a neat braid, and deep wrinkles surrounded tired blue eyes that seemed to study every movement I made. "You here for hiking?" she asked. "Photography." She nodded slowly. "The forest?" "That's right." She didn't smile. Instead, she reached beneath the counter and unfolded an old paper map. Bright yellow lines marked the official hiking trails. Then she pointed toward a large blank area in the northern forest. "If you ever find a trail here..." Her finger rested on empty paper. "Don't follow it." I smiled politely. "I've got GPS." "You won't." "I'm sorry. Your GPS won't help you." I laughed softly, assuming she enjoyed scaring tourists. I've hiked all over the country. GPS has never failed me." Her expression remained perfectly still. "It will here." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped gently against the windows. The motel suddenly felt much quieter than before. Finally, I folded the map. "I appreciate the warning." She looked directly into my eyes. "I'm not trying to scare you." She paused. "I'm trying to keep you alive." Those words lingered in my mind long after I left the office. That evening, I walked across the street to the diner. Only 5 people sat inside. A truck driver, an elderly couple, 2 park rangers eating in complete silence. The waitress poured fresh coffee into my mug. "You must be new." "It shows." She smiled. "Everybody knows everybody around here." I told her about my assignment. The smile slowly disappeared. "Which trail are you hiking tomorrow?" "Crow Ridge Loop." She nodded. "That's safe. Safe? She hesitated before speaking again. Just stay on the marked path. I chuckled. Everyone keeps telling me that. Nobody at the nearby tables laughed. Instead, the two park rangers quietly looked at each other. One of them stood up, paid his bill, and walked out without saying a word. The older ranger remained seated. After a few moments, he carried his coffee over to my table. You the photographer? Yeah. He extended a rough hand. Daniel Brooks. His handshake was firm. I've worked these forests for 26 years. Must know every trail by now. He stared into his coffee. I thought I did. A strange silence followed. Then he leaned closer. If you ever notice birds suddenly go quiet. I nodded. Turn around. If your compass starts spinning. I forced a smile. Turn around. If you find a trail that wasn't there before. His eyes met mine. Run. I laughed awkwardly. You people really know how to welcome visitors. He didn't laugh. I've buried too many people who laughed. The words hit harder than I expected. For the first time that day, I felt uncomfortable. Outside, the rain had become heavier. Wind pushed against the diner windows. The mountains had completely disappeared behind thick fog. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Around 2 in the morning, a strange sound woke me. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow footsteps. Outside my room, they moved carefully across the gravel parking lot, then stopped. Right outside my window. I held my breath. Silence. After nearly a minute, I slowly pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. No people. No animals. Only rain falling beneath the yellow glow of a single streetlight. I told myself it was probably a deer. Or maybe another guest. Eventually, exhaustion won. Morning arrived with clear skies. The storm had disappeared, leaving behind cool mountain air and a fresh scent of pine. Perfect hiking weather. I packed my backpack carefully. Camera, drone, extra batteries, water, bear spray, satellite communicator, paper map. Before leaving town, I stopped at the gas station. The cashier glanced toward my hiking gear. Crow Ridge? Yeah. Good trail. Then his smile faded. If you decide to explore. He looked toward the forest beyond the highway. Don't. It was the fourth warning I'd received in less than 24 hours. By now, it had become almost amusing. People in small towns love their local legends. An hour later, I reached the Crow Ridge trailhead. The parking lot was empty. No hikers. No vehicles. Only tall pine trees swaying gently in the wind. The silence felt unusually heavy. I checked my GPS. Signal locked. Compass working. Everything looked normal. I began hiking. The first hour was beautiful. Sunlight filtered through the trees. Birds sang overhead. Small streams crossed the trail. The forest felt peaceful. Exactly the kind of place I'd come to photograph. Then, everything changed. Without warning, the birds stopped singing. Completely. The silence was instant. So sudden it felt unnatural. Even the wind seemed to disappear. I stopped walking. Every instinct told me something wasn't right. Slowly, I looked ahead. About 50 yards away, a second trail branched off into the forest. It looked old, well-worn, wide enough that hundreds of hikers could have used it for years. Curious, I unfolded the paper map. Nothing. No trail. I checked my GPS. Nothing. The path simply didn't exist. Yet I could see it clearly, leading into the darkest part of the forest. Almost waiting for me. A cold breeze brushed against my neck. Then, Somewhere deep between the trees, a voice whispered, "Ethan." I spun around. There was no one there. The trail that was never on any map. Chapter 2. The trail that shouldn't exist. The whisper lasted less than a second. "Ethan." I turned so quickly that my backpack nearly threw me off balance. The forest behind me was empty. Towering pine trees stretched in every direction, their trunks standing like silent pillars beneath the afternoon sun. No movement. No footsteps. No voices. Only silence. I stood there for nearly a full minute, convincing myself I'd imagined it. The warnings from Black Pine were getting into my head. That had to be it. I looked back at the strange trail. It was impossible to ignore. Unlike the official hiking path behind me, this trail looked older. The ground was packed smooth, as if thousands of boots had walked across it for decades. Yet there were no footprints. No bicycle tracks. No horse prints. Nothing. Just untouched earth. I unfolded the paper map again. Nothing. The GPS still showed solid green. According to the screen, I was standing in the middle of untouched forest. No side trail. No junction. Nothing. Curiosity slowly defeated caution. "I'm only taking a quick look," I whispered to myself. I stepped onto the trail. The temperature dropped instantly. Not a little. Enough to send chills across my arms. The warm summer breeze disappeared. Even the smell changed. The fresh scent of pine was replaced by damp earth and wet moss. I stopped. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous. Just different. I took another step. Then another. The forest became strangely quiet. No birds. No insects. No wind. It was as if every living thing had abandoned this place. After 5 minutes, I reached a weathered wooden sign. Its surface had almost completely rotted away. Only one sentence remained carved into the wood. "Turn back while you still remember." I frowned. What does that even mean? Someone had scratched deep claw-like marks across the bottom half of the sign. They didn't look like bear marks. They were too evenly spaced. I raised my camera and snapped several photographs. When I checked the display, every picture was completely black. The camera was working. The battery was full. Yet every image showed only darkness. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I switched to my phone. The camera app froze, then crashed. I suddenly realized something. My phone had lost all signal. Not just cell service. Everything. Even the GPS icon had disappeared. A wave of uneasiness washed over me. For the first time since entering the trail, I thought about turning back. I looked over my shoulder. The path behind me seemed longer than before. Much longer. Almost impossible. I shook my head. No! I'm imagining things. I kept walking. The trees grew taller. Their branches blocked most of the sunlight. The forest darkened. 20 minutes later, I found something impossible. A backpack. It rested against a fallen log, covered in dust, weathered by years of rain. I carefully unzipped it. Inside were a sleeping bag, a flashlight, an empty water bottle, and a driver's license. The photograph showed a smiling young man. Name: Michael Dawson. Age: 27. Expiration date: 15 years ago. My heart began beating faster. The backpack looked old, but not 15 years old. I searched the remaining pockets. A folded notebook. Most of the pages had dissolved from moisture. Only one page remained readable. Written in shaky handwriting were 6 words. The trail doesn't let you leave. I stared at the sentence. A sudden crack echoed through the trees. Someone had stepped on a branch. I spun around. Nothing. The forest stood perfectly still. Ethan! The whisper returned. Closer this time. Almost behind my shoulder. I whipped around. No one. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I reached for my compass. The needle spun wildly. Round and round. Never stopping. My breathing grew faster. Okay. Time to go. I turned toward the way I'd come. The trail was gone. Completely. Where the path should have been. Only dense forest remained. No footprints. No opening. No sign that anyone had ever walked there. I blinked repeatedly. This isn't possible. I searched left. Then right. Nothing. Panic slowly crept into my chest. I forced myself to stay calm. People got lost because they panicked. Not me. I marked a nearby tree with my hunting knife. A large X. Then I chose a direction and started walking. 10 minutes later, the same tree stood in front of me. The same X. The same broken branch. The same moss-covered rock. I had walked in a perfect circle. Without realizing it, a chill crawled up my spine. The warnings. The motel owner. The waitress. Ranger Brooks. Every one of them had tried to keep me away from this place. The trail that was never on any map. Chapter 3. Something was following me. Running through a forest is one of the first things experienced hikers tell you never to do. I knew that. Panic makes people careless. Careless people get injured. Injured people don't make it home. But every survival rule I'd ever learned disappeared the moment those footsteps started following me. Crunch. 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 No matter how fast I ran, they stayed behind me. Always the same distance. Never getting closer. Never falling behind. It was as if whatever was following me already knew exactly where I would go. After several minutes, my lungs burned. I slowed to a walk, trying to catch my breath. The footsteps stopped. I stood perfectly still. Silence. Not a single bird. Not a single insect. Even the wind had vanished. Slowly, I turned around. Nothing. The trail behind me was empty. Towering pines disappeared into a blanket of gray mist. I tightened my grip on the bear spray. "Who's there?" I shouted. Only my own voice echoed through the trees. No answer. A few moments later, the footsteps began again. Crunch. 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 My heart pounded against my ribs. I wasn't alone. I just couldn't prove it. An hour passed. The sun should have been moving across the sky. Instead, it seemed frozen in place. I checked my watch. 3:17 p.m. I walked for another 20 minutes. The forest never changed. The same trees. The same rocks. The same silence. I looked at my watch again. 3:17 p.m. The second hand wasn't moving. Neither was the minute hand. My watch had stopped. I pulled out my phone. The battery, which had been nearly full that morning, now showed only 1%. Before I could react, the screen went black. Dead. I suddenly realized something even stranger. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. It felt as though time itself had stopped inside the forest. Then I saw smoke. Thin gray smoke drifting through the trees. Relief washed over me. Someone else was here. I hurried toward it. A small wooden cabin stood in a clearing. It looked decades old. The roof sagged under its own weight. Most of the windows were broken. A rusted lantern hung beside the front door. "Hello?" I called. No answer. The door creaked open with a gentle push. Dust covered everything. A wooden table. A fireplace. An old rocking chair. It looked abandoned. Until I noticed the fire. Fresh embers glowed inside the fireplace. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. I slowly stepped farther inside. On the wall hung dozens of black and white photographs. Every picture showed hikers, families, campers, park rangers. Some smiled. Some looked terrified. Every single photograph had one thing in common. Standing somewhere in the background, half hidden behind a tree, was the same tall figure. Watching. Always watching. Its face was impossible to make out. Only its shape. Long arms. Unnaturally thin. Perfectly still. A cold shiver ran through my body. I leaned closer to one photograph. The date written beneath it read, August 14, 1989. Another, September 3, 1997. Another, June 21, 2008. Different years. Different people. The same figure. Watching them all. Then I found the newest photograph. My hands began to shake. It had been taken that morning. At the Crow Ridge trailhead. I was standing beside my truck, checking my backpack, completely unaware that someone had taken my picture. My blood turned to ice. Someone had been watching me before I ever entered the trail. A loud creak echoed upstairs. I froze. Another creak. Slow footsteps crossed the floor above me. Someone was inside the cabin. I grabbed my bear spray. Hello? Silence. Then, one slow footstep. Another. The footsteps stopped directly above my head. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Something heavy stood there, listening. The old staircase groaned. One step. Another. Another. Whoever, or whatever, was upstairs was coming down. I backed toward the front door. The staircase continued to creak. The shadow of long legs appeared against the wall. Too tall. Far too tall to belong to any person. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran out of the cabin. The forest swallowed me once again. Behind me, the cabin door slammed shut. Not from the wind. From the inside. I ran until I reached a small stream. Finally. Water. I dropped to my knees and reached toward it. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't following my movements. I slowly raised my right hand. My reflection kept both hands at its sides. I stopped breathing. The reflection smiled. I hadn't. Then it whispered, "You should have turned back." The water exploded into ripples. My reflection vanished. I stumbled backward in terror. Branches snapped behind me. Crunch. 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 The footsteps had returned. Closer than ever before. B. This time, I could hear breathing. Slow. Deep. Patient. I turned toward the sound. At the edge of the trees, half hidden by the fog, a tall figure stood motionless between the pines. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It simply watched me. Then, very slowly, it lifted one impossibly long arm and pointed deeper into the forest. As if it already knew, there was only one path left for me to follow. The trail that was never on any map. Chapter 4. The trail never lets you leave. The figure never took a single step. It simply stood between the towering pines, one impossibly long arm pointing deeper into the forest. Every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction. I did. I turned and sprinted through the trees, crashing through bushes and low branches, no longer caring about noise or direction. Behind me, nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. The silence was somehow worse. After several minutes, I slowed down. The forest looked different. The pine trees were older, thicker. Many of them carried strange symbols carved into their bark. Some marks were fresh. Others had almost disappeared beneath decades of growth. Then I noticed something else. Names. Hundreds of names. Each carved by a different hand. Michael Dawson, Sarah Collins, Daniel Price, Emma Brooks. Some names were followed by dates. Others ended with a single word. Lost. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. These weren't random carvings. These were people. People who had entered this place and never found their way home. A few yards ahead, I found another backpack. Then another. A rusted flashlight. A broken hiking pole. A child stuffed bear, faded by years of rain. It looked as though the forest had been collecting memories instead of letting them leave. Then I heard a familiar voice. Ethan! I froze. It was Ranger Daniel Brooks. He stepped out from behind a tree, breathing heavily. His Green Ranger uniform was torn, and his face was covered in dirt. There you are, he shouted. I've been looking everywhere for you. Relief flooded through me. I thought I was trapped. You are? He replied quietly. His answer sent another chill through my body. What? He looked around nervously before speaking. I found this trail 22 years ago. You what? I was a rookie ranger. His eyes never left the trees. My partner walked ahead of me. He swallowed hard. I never saw him again. I stared at him. But you've been working in Black Pine ever since. He slowly shook his head. No. I escaped. My heart lifted for a moment. Then we can get out? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me an old newspaper clipping. The headline made my blood run cold. Montana Park Ranger missing during search operation. Below the headline was a photograph. Daniel Brooks. The article was dated October 14, 2003. I looked back at him. My hands began to shake. That's impossible. His tired eyes filled with sadness. I know. Before I could ask another question, the forest erupted with sound. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Hundreds of footsteps. Not one. Not two. Hundreds. They surrounded us from every direction. Daniel's face turned pale. They're coming. Who? He whispered only one word. The Watchers. Dark shapes began appearing between the trees. Tall. Thin. Perfectly still. 1. Then 5. Then 20. Then more than I could count. None of them had visible faces. Only endless darkness beneath their hoods of shadow. They never rushed. They simply watched. Waiting. Daniel grabbed my arm. Don't look at them for too long. Why? They'll remember you. A deep horn echoed through the forest. The ground vibrated beneath our feet. Every shadow slowly raised its head toward the sound. Daniel looked terrified. We have one chance. He pointed toward a narrow opening between two ancient pines. The exit only appears once. We ran. Branches tore at our clothes. The horn sounded again. The footsteps behind us multiplied. The forest itself seemed alive. Trees shifted. Roots twisted across the ground. The trail changed with every step. Then, I saw it. Sunlight. A dirt road. My truck. Only 50 yards away. We made it! I shouted. Daniel stopped running. No! I turned. Aren't you coming? A sad smile crossed his face. It only lets one person leave. No! Ethan, you saved me. I'm not leaving without you. He shook his head. You already did. The shadows emerged from the trees behind him. One by one. Silent. Patient. Daniel slowly stepped backward. If you stay, we both disappear. My eyes filled with tears. He gave one final nod. Go! I ran. The moment my boots touched the dirt road, everything disappeared. The whispers, the footsteps, the horn. The forest fell completely silent. I collapsed beside my truck, gasping for air. When I looked back, there was no mysterious trail, only untouched wilderness, as if nothing had ever been there. 3 days later, I returned to Black Pine. The sheriff listened quietly as I explained everything. When I finished, he opened an old filing cabinet. Without saying a word, he placed a faded photograph on the desk. It showed 6 park rangers standing in front of the Crow Ridge trailhead. Daniel Brooks stood in the center, smiling. The sheriff sighed. That's the last photo we ever took of him. He disappeared during a search in October, 23 years ago. I couldn't speak. The sheriff leaned forward. People still claim they've seen him. They say he tries to lead lost hikers back to safety. But no one knows if it's really him, or if the forest simply learned his face. I left Montana the next morning. I never published the photographs. Most of them were nothing but black images, except one. The very last picture stored on my camera. It showed me standing at the entrance to the impossible trail. I was completely alone, or so I thought. Behind me, half hidden between 2 pine trees, stood one impossibly tall figure, watching. When I enlarged the image, my blood froze. The figure wasn't looking at me. It was looking directly into the camera, as if it knew. One day, you would be looking at it too. The end.